Morning Rush Hour. We have the latest updates so far as the global economy is concerned, Indian businesses, and of course updates from the markets. Over the next 30 minutes, we'll be taking you through the top stories that we are tracking here on the show. So let's then begin with some updates that are coming in from the United States. Well, Elon Musk is slamming Donald Trump's massive tax and spending bill. He's called it a disgusting abomination that worsens America's $36 trillion debt. Musk's fiery posts have triggered support from deficit hawks who worry that the bill's $3.8 trillion cost is just unsustainable. However, now Senate revisions loom as Trump defends the bill and the White House brushes off Musk's criticism. We have with us Dr. Amlendu Palit, Senior Research Fellow and Research Lead Trade and Economics at the Institute of South Asian Studies, and Mr. Raymond Vickery, former U.S. Assistant Secretary of Commerce. Thank you very much, gentlemen, for joining us here on ET Now. Let me first come to you, Mr. Vickery. You have given some figures with respect to the kind of debt that the U.S. economy will have to face. There are, of course, larger concerns as well that have been raised by Moody's and several other ratings agencies. The big question now is, as Trump administration is stating and it is intending to have, will these tax cuts, will the big beautiful bill have the desired effect and impact that Donald Trump is looking at achieving?
Well, thanks very much for having me. You're quite right to focus on this so-called big beautiful bill. If we're going to build peace and prosperity in the world, if India and the U.S. are going to cooperate, you've got to have a very strong economy that will support that effort. This bill, which is winding its way through the Congress, Elon Musk, I think, is quite right in that it is not in the national interest because it adds so much to the national debt here, $3.1 trillion. Over the next decade is not a sustainable way to go forward. That's the bad news. The good news, of course, is that this bill is far from done. It only passed by a 2-vote margin in regard to the House, and the Senate is considering it, and there's substantial opposition to many of the provisions of the bill, particularly as it affects the bond market. There are signs, Moody's downgrade, that it would have an impact on the bond market. And if it does that, the ability of the United States to finance its debt, we've already surpassed the amount we spend on financing the debt. We've surpassed that we spend on defense. Social Security is the only larger outlay for the United States. So this is not a sustainable way to go forward, and there's quite a bit of concern here.
Totally unsustainable, and you seem to be agreeing with Elon Musk, who's been a close ally of Donald Trump. Dr. Palit, let me come to you. When such a close ally of Donald Trump is seen to be making comments that seem critical of the president's policies, how is it being viewed by Americans, and what is the likely impact that it's going to have on Donald Trump's standing in the U.S. As a nation, as a country?
Thank you, Sumita, for inviting me to the show. I think, it's really not a matter of surprise, because if you look at Elon Musk as a producer, this is something which is not acceptable to him insofar as a producer's logic is concerned. And let's just take a step back. Why has this bill come? If you look at the fact that the American policy for managing its economy under Donald Trump has been one of imposing tariffs for correcting its trade deficit, then it means what happens with the other nations is a different story. But for American consumers, the costs of the goods that they purchase immediately go up because of these high tariffs. Now, the Trump strategy is that while the costs go up, they bring revenues for the treasury. But on the other hand, in order to make sure that the life of the consumer does not get more difficult, you give them tax breaks. The problem over here is that this is not a rocket science. It doesn't work the way this bill wants the objective to be achieved. And this is clearly where somebody like Elon Musk is completely at odds with the policy, because the policy means you are taking away the subsidies that encouraged growth of electric vehicles in India. You are making the imported components much more expensive, on which he had expressed his concern earlier. And number three, the entire fiscal disciplining exercise, which arguably the Dodge is up to, that it has been doing for the last 6 months under Musk's stewardship, is not something which was intended to achieve this outcome, because this only increases the budget deficit that the United States is going to have. It is going to impact its ability to float bonds and treasuries, which have been actually financing significant part of the American economy for a number of years now. So obviously, as a producer and as somebody who has a distinct instinct and sense for business, there's no way Elon Musk can support this bill unless he wears the Trump hat separately.
Right. Mr. Vikri, I'll come to you in just a bit, but let me reiterate the question that I asked Dr. Palit. What's the impact that it's likely to have on Americans and Donald Trump's standing as a politician, as the president of the country?
Well, right now, of course, these effects, which would be adverse, are all in futuro. They haven't affected yet. There is the meme going around the internet, about Taco. Trump always chickens out in regard to tariffs. So the effect really hasn't hit. There's been ups and downs in terms of approval ratings, and ups and downs indeed in regard to the markets. So it hasn't hit yet, and so his standing is, as he said, he could shoot somebody on Fifth Avenue, and his core supporters would not abandon him. And that's the situation right now. But the situation will become acute, and his standing will drop, because if you increase the national debt, you increase the cost of borrowing, you're going to increase the cost of borrowing for average citizens. This will not be good, combined with the increase in prices that would be caused by actually putting into effect the draconian tariffs he's talking about. So right now, President Trump is riding about the same kinds of approval that he's had. But this is not going to redound to his political benefit. And I predict we'll have, if it goes through in its present form, we'll have disastrous effects in the midterm elections, which are coming up next year. And of course, we have two state elections, New Jersey and Virginia, this year, and it will hurt President Trump's standing. So it's a difficult situation, but the full effects of it have not yet been felt. And people in the United States, of course, who are wise about bonds and financing, are taking steps to protect themselves.
Right. Right. So there is still some time before the effects are felt by Americans in the country. But let me come to you, Dr. Palit. Now, when we are, of course, talking about the impact on Americans, but more importantly, when you talk about America's allies, how much does this commentary that's coming in from Elon Musk really impact the negotiating power with respect to US's allies, given the fact that the United States administration is currently in the midst of striking deals?
I think it does make an impact. It makes an impact in the sense that it will confirm the suspicions which many of the allies have had for some time, that within the Trump administration, there are views which are not converging on the same ideas and same narrative, there is a great degree of divergence. And the problem with that kind of a divergence is that when countries are negotiating with the United States on a variety of issues, they continue to hold the unpredictability in the negotiating posture and approach as a major assumption, because they don't really know what the negotiation posture is going to be across the table over a period in time. If there are policy flip-flops and if there are advisors who have guided economic policy till a point in time suddenly vacate. And in this vein, I'd like to also add, Sumita, that there is this greater concern which many countries will have. And you would have seen slowly there is this view that there are countries which are holding large parts of the US Treasury bonds, beginning to think of alternatives in which they can diversify their portfolios. It's not going to happen overnight, clearly, but the trend towards that diversification will certainly strengthen if this is the kind of fiscal strategy that the Trump administration is going to adopt, on the back of the fact that there are clear rifts and divisions within the top poles of decision making within the administration.
Absolutely, and that's been made clear by, of course, Elon Musk departing from the Doge department, and now the commentary that he is making, definitely reflective of the kind of rift that's being seen in the present dispensation. And gentlemen, as you rightly pointed out, that as of now, the American population might not be feeling the heat in terms of the impact that this big beautiful bill is going to have, but definitely it's going to impact the United States negotiating posture, given that there have been multiple flip-flops. On that note, thank you very much for joining us here on 18 Hour, gentlemen. Appreciate you taking the time out.
My pleasure. Thank you.